God, we're early. Amazing. Okay, this is a world first. We've never actually been early. Ram, are you doing the Jadwani?
Jai Shri Shri Guru Gauranga Gandharvika Giridhari Shri Shri Radha Vinod Bihari Shri Shri Radha Damodar Ji Ki Jai. Om Vishnupad Paramahangsa Parivrajakacharya Ashtotra Shat Shri Srimad Bhakti Vedanta Narayan Goswami Maharaj Shila Gurudev Ki Jai. Nitrila Pravishtam Vishnupad Ashtotra Shat Shri Srimad Bhakti Vedanta Trivikram Goswami Maharaj Ki Jai. Nitrila Pravishtam Vishnupad Ashtotra Shat Shri Srimad Bhakti Vedanta Vaman Goswami Maharaj Ki Jai. Nitrila Pravishtam Vishnupad Ashtotra Shat Shri Srimad Bhakti Vedanta Swami Maharaj Shila Prabhupada Ki Jai. आचार्य केशरी परम गुरुदेव नित्रिला प्रविष्टम विष्णुपाद अष्टोत्र शत श्री श्रीमद भक्ति प्रज्ञान केशव गोस्वामी महाराज की जय. जगत गुरु नित्रिला प्रविष्टम विष्णुपाद अष्टोत्र शत श्री श्रीमद भक्ति सिद्धांत सरस्वती गोस्वामी ठाकुर शिल प्रभुपाद की जय. महाभागवत शिल गौर किशोरदास बाबा जी महाराज की जय. सप्तम गोस्वामी सचिदानंद शिल भक्ति विनोद ठाकुर की जय. वैष्णव सार्वभौम शिल जगन्नाथ दास बाबा जी महाराज की जय. श्री गौड़ीय वेदांत आचार्य शिल बलदेव विद्याभूषण प्रभु की जय. श्री गौड़ीय रसाचार्य शिल विश्वनाथ चक्रवर्ती ठाकुर की जय. शिल नरोत्तम श्रीनिवास श्यामानंद प्रभु त्रय की जय. श्री कृष्णदास कविराज गोस्वामी प्रभु की जय. व्यास भिन्न शिल वृंदावन दास ठाकुर की जय. श्री रूप सनातन भट्ट रघुनाथ श्री जीव गोपाल भट्टदास रघुनाथ शर गोस्वामी प्रभु की जय. श्री लोकनाथ दास गोस्वामी की जय. श्री भूगर्भ गोस्वामी की जय. श्री स्वरूप दामोदर गोस्वामी राय रामानंद शिखी मोहिती माधवी देवी गौर पार्षद वृंद की जय. नामाचार्य श्री हरिदास ठाकुर की जय. श्री कृष्ण चैतन्य प्रभु नित्यानंद श्री अद्वैत गदाधर श्रीवासादि गौर भक्त वृंद की जय. श्री अंतरद्वीप मायापुर सीमंत द्वीप गोद्रमद्वीप मध्यद्वीप कोलद्वीप ऋतुद्वीप जनद्वीप मोद्रद्रमद्वीप रुद्राद्वीपात्मक श्री नवद्वीप धाम की जय. श्री श्री राधा कृष्ण गोप गोपी गो गोवर्धन द्वारस्वरात्मक श्री ब्रजमंडल की जय. सर्वभीष्ट प्रदायिनी श्री गिरिरानी महारानी की जय. श्री ललिता विशाखा आदि सखी वृंद की जय. श्री अनंग मंजरी की जय. श्री रूप मंजरी रति मंजरी विनोद मंजरी कमल मंजरी and all the other manjaris ki jai. Shri Radha Kunda Shama Kunda Jamuna Ganga Tulsi Bhakti Devi ki jai. Kula Devi Bhagavati Purnamashi Devi Yoga Maya ki jai. Shri Gopeshwar Mahadeva ki jai. Shri Jagannath Baladev Subhadra Sudarshan Chakra ji ki jai. Purushottam Kshetra Shri Jagannath Puri Dham ki jai. भक्ति विघ्न विनाशनकारी नरसिंह भगवान की जय. भक्त प्रवर श्री प्रहलाद महाराज की जय. चारु धाम चारु आचार्य चारि संप्रदाय की जय. आकर मद्राज श्री चैतन्य मठ की जय. श्री केशव जी गौड़िया मठ की जय. श्री रूप सनातन गौड़िया मठ की जय. श्री गोपीनाथ भवन की जय. श्री गिरधारी गौड़िया मठ की जय. श्री श्री केशव जी गौड़िया मठ कोलद्वीप धाम की जय. श्री गुरुदेव समाधि मंदिर की जय. जय श्री दामोदर गौड़िया मठ की जय. श्री रमन बिहारी गौड़िया मठ की जय. श्री राधा माधव गौड़िया मठ की जय. गौरवाणी गौड़िया मठ की जय. गंगा माता गौड़िया मठ की जय. श्रीवास संगम इन हैकनी की जय. श्री भक्ति जूम की जय. अन्य शाखा मत समूह की जय. कलयुग पावन त्रिभुवन मंगलकारी गोलोकेर प्रेम धन हरिनाम संकीर्तन की जय. जुगल नाम हरे कृष्ण महामंत्र की जय. मृदंग करताल की जय. जय शिल भक्ति कमल गोविंद महाराज की जय. शिल भक्ति स्वरूप दामोदर महाराज की जय. शिल गौर गोविंद गोस्वामी महाराज की जय. शिल भक्ति विज्ञान भारती गोस्वामी महाराज की जय. शिल भक्ति वल्लभ तीर्थ गोस्वामी महाराज की जय. शिल भक्ति कुमुद संत गोस्वामी महाराज की जय. शिल भक्ति वैभव पुरी गोस्वामी महाराज की जय. शिल भक्ति जीवन जनार्दन गोस्वामी महाराज की जय. शिल भक्ति दैत माधव गोस्वामी महाराज की जय. शिल भक्ति रक्षक श्रीधर गोस्वामी महाराज की जय. शिल भक्ति श्री रूप सिद्धांति गोस्वामी महाराज की जय. शिल भक्ति प्रमोदपुरी गोस्वामी महाराज की जय. सपरिकर जगत गुरु शिल प्रभुपाद की जय. वृंदावन वासी भक्त वृंद की जय. नीलाचल वासी भक्त वृंद की जय. नवद्वीप धाम वासी भक्त वृंद की जय. गौर देशवासी भक्त वृंद की जय. जे देशे वैसे गौरांगेर गण की जय. होया छेन होइबेन प्रभुर जत दास की जय. All devotees watching on Zoom, YouTube and Facebook ki jai. Anant Koti Vaishnava Vrinda ki jai. Samagata Bhakta Vrinda ki jai. Jai Shri Radha Damodar ki jai. Shri Urja Vrat ki jai. Kartik Vrat ki jai. Vraj-mandala Dham Parikrama ki jai. Parikrama Kari Bhakta Vrinda ki jai. Nitai Gaur Premanande Hari Hari Bo.
Hari Bo, Dandavats. That felt like the bhajan as well as the Jayadwani. That's beautiful. What are you singing for us this morning, Prabhu?
Because we're speaking on Sri Damodarastakam, I will be singing Sri Damodarastakam.
Wonderful, thank you.
I usually read the translation, but because the whole class will be about it, I will skip that this time. That's a long translation as well. Namamishwaram Sachidanandarupam Lasat Kundalam Gokule Brajamana Yashoda Bhiyolukha Ladhavamana Param Drishtamatya Tato Drutya Gopya Namamishwara Sachidanandarupa Lasat Kundala Gokule Brajamana Rudanta Muhur Netra Yugamamrijanta Parambhojayugmena Satankanetra Muhuswasakampa Trirekhankakantha Sthita Graiva-damodaram Bhakti-badham Namamishwaram Sachidanandarupam Lasat Kundalam Gokule Brajamanam Iti Drika Swalilabhi Ananda Kunde Svaghosham Nimajanta Akhyapayanta Tadiyeshitagyeshu Bhaktairjitatva Puna Prematasta Shatabriti Vande Namamishwara Sachidanandarupa Lasat Kundala Gokule Brajamana Varam Deva Moksha Namokshavadhimba Na Chanyam Vrineyaha Vareshadapiha Idam Teva Purnatha Gopal Bala Sada Me Manashavi Rashtam Kimanye Namamishwara Sachidanandarupa Lasat Kundala Gokule Brajamana Idam Te Mukha Bhoja Abhyakta Nila Vritam Kuntalai Snigdha Raktaishcha Gopya Muhuschumbitam Bimba Raktadhara Me Manashabirashtam Alam Lakshalabhe Namamishwara Sachidanandarupa Asat Kundala Vrajamana. Namo Deva Damodarananta Vishnu Prasiddha Prabhu Dukha Jala Bhimagna Prasiddha Prabhu Dukha Jala Bhimagna Kripa Drishti Vristyati Dinam Batanu Grihane Shamamagya Edhyakshidrisha Namamishvara Sachidananda Rupa Asat Kundala Gokule Vrajamana Kuveratmajo Bhatha Murtyaiva Yatva Tvaya Mochito Bhakti Bhajo Krito Cha Tatha Prema Bhakti Swakame Prayacha Tatha Prema Bhakti Swakame Prayacha Namokshe Graho Mesti Damodareha Namamishvara Sachidananda Rupa Asat Kundala Gokule Vrajamana Namaste Studamne Spuradipti Dhamne Tvadiyodarayatha Vishvashadhamne Namo Radhikaye Tvadiya Priyaye Namo Nantalilaya Devaya Tubhyam Namo Radhikaye Tvadiya Priyaye Namo Radhikaye Tvadiya Priyaye Namo Radhikaye Tvadiya Priyaye Namo Nantalilaya Devaya Tubhyam Radha Damodara Radha Damodara Damodara Radha Damodara Jaya Radha Damodara Radha Damodara Radhe Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare Hare Nitai Gaur Hari Bol Hari Bol Hari Bol Hari Bol Nitai Gaur Hari Bol Hari Bol Hari Bol Hari Bol Nitai Gaur Premanande Hari Hari Bol
Hari Bol Ramananda Ji. Beautiful. I always really appreciate in the final verse how Gurudev would insist the playing of Namo Radhikaya 3 times. Yeah, it's like always in Rupa Sanatam or in Keshava Gaudiya Math, it was always the crescendo of that Damodarastakam. You could feel everyone just going crazy. Beautiful, really lovely. Thank you. Vanchakalpaturvascha Kripasinduevacha Patitanam Pavanabhyo Vaishnavabhyo Namaha Om Gyan Tiramandasya Gyanjana Salakaya Chakshurmilitam Yana Tashmai Shri Guru Namaha Trinadapi Sunichana Tarodapi Sahaishnuna Amani Namanadena Kitni Sadahari Tatena Kampam Susamik Shamano Punjnagatma Kritam Vipikam Hitbak Papudevi Gram Namaste Jivatayo Mukti Sadayabak Vachavegamash Korvegam Jivavegam Urapastavegam Etam Vegam Yovishaheta Dira Savnapi Mampradvim Sasisyat Anya balasta sunyam gyan kamriyan vritam manukalenya Krishna shilam bhakti utma. Jai Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadhar Shivasadi Gaura Bhakta Vrinda. Hare Krishna 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 Hare Hare, Hare Ram 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 Hare Hare. For my Shishtanga Dandavat pranams to my Gurudev Srila Bhaktivedanta Narayana Swami Maharaj, to Srila A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami Prabhupada, to the entire Parampara, to our illustrious, most merciful Rupanuga line of acharyas, to Srila Raghunath Goswami, Srila Rupa Goswami, to Lord Nityananda Prabhu, to Lord Chaitanya Prabhu, and Shishishi, Radha and Krishna. Also pay my Shtanga Dandavats to all of the assembled devotees on YouTube, on Facebook, on Zoom, and all devotees who are going to listen to the recording in the future. Yes, today is day 23, which for all of those geeks out there is a prime number, which means no number, it's not divisible by any other number. But I was looking up the properties of number 23, and apparently it is a happy and magnanimous number. So we definitely have a very happy and magnanimous program today, because the entire program today is on the subject of Sri Damodarastakam. We're on verse 3, and I'll be welcoming on the Vyasa Sun our beloved and most merciful and sweet Maharaj, who is here every single day, always giving Harikatha, sharing Harikatha from his heart, Sripad Bhaktivedanta Sri Dandi Maharaj. But before I do so, I just want to announce that tonight we have an extra special rendition or discourse, because this morning Maharaj very kindly agreed to do an overview in 45 minutes of the whole of the Sri Damodarastakam. And I have that on recording, and we're going to be playing that as the first speaker tonight at our 6 p.m. UK time session. I really encourage everyone to watch that, because I think it creates more connection, a deeper relationship with the whole Ashtakam, and enables us to understand each verse better in the context of the entire ontology of this wonderful bhajan, Ashtakam prayer. Hari Bol Marji, I'm going to ask you to unmute and hand over to you. Damodarastakam, Sri Damodarastakam, Hari Bol.
Dandavat Yashoda Prabhu, Dandavat. Agyan Timirandasya Gyananjala Shalakaya Chakshu Unmilitam Jena Tasmai Shri Gurave Namaha. Gurave Gaura Chandraya Radhikaya Tadalaya Krishnaya Krishna Bhaktaya Tadabhaktaya Namo Namaha. I'm first of all offering millions and millions of Dandavat pranams unto the lotus feet of my most beloved Gurudev, Nitya Lila Pravishta Om Astottarasarashi Shrimad Srila Bhaktivedanta Narayan Goswami Maharaj. And the same again, millions and millions of times unto the lotus feet of our most beloved Nitya Lila Pravishta Om Astottarasarashi Shrimad Srila Bhaktivedanta Swami Srila Prabhupada, and all our glorious Rupanuga Guru Vargya, and all the Vaishnavas and Vaishnavi devotees of the Lord who are listening today to our Katha, and all those in the future who will listen on different platforms, etc. My Dandavat pranams to all of you. Vanchakalpa Turubhyascha, Kripa Sindhavevacha, Patitanam Pavanebhyo Vaishnavebhyo Namaha. Yashoda Prabhu, you have a video to play first.
Yeah, I think Turunji is going to play. You want that now, Maharaj?
Yes, please.
Yeah, Turunji?
This is just to give us the atmosphere of Braj.
Yeah, no one sent it to me.
Oh, okay, I'll do it. No problem, Maharaj. 1 second. Maybe speak for about 60 seconds. It will take me 60 to 90 seconds to do this.
We're about to enter a visual of Braj, very beautiful, with a beautiful bhajan by Bhaktivinoda Thakur, sung by our dear Krishna Das Prabhu, who left this world recently, and a very glorious description of all of the pastimes in Vrindavan. Because today, in the third verse, Ananda Kunde, we're going to a kund full of beautiful, sweet pastimes. So this video will demonstrate some of the areas of those pastimes. Okay, you got the video, Yashoda? Got the video? No video?
Just not come. Just it will come.
I think we're on Indian time today.
Radha Kunda Tata Radha Kunda Radha Kunda Tata Kunja Kutira Govardhana Parvata Yamuna Tira Radha Kunda Tata Jai Radha Kunda Tata Kunja Kutira Govardhana Parvata Yamuna Tira Radha Kunda Tata Kusuma Sarabara Manasa Ganga Kusuma Kusuma Sarabara Manasa Ganga Kalinda Nandini Dukula Taranga Kalinda Nandini Jai Jai Radha Kunda Tata Kunja Kutira Govardhana Parvata Yamuna Tira Radha Bangshivata Gokula Dhira Samira Bangshivata Ar Vrindavana Taru Latika Bamira Vrindavana Khagomriga Kula Malaya Batas Khagomriga Ari Khagomriga Kula Malaya Batas Amayura Brahmara Murali Vilasa Mayura Brahmara Jai Jai Radha Kunda Tata Kunja Kuti.
Maharaj, last night when Srimati Radhika Manchanda was speaking, she was saying about that pastime when the cowboys are playing with Krishna down in the southwest. I can't remember which location it was now.
Dig.
It was in Dig, was it? And how you were saying, I remember how the rocks softened. And she was saying that everything in Braj is so soft, even the rocks, the mountains, the trees, everything's so soft, it can melt so easily. And I felt that video really portrayed that.
Yes, beautiful. Incredible video. Yes, beautiful. Thank you so much, Janardhan Prabhu. Janardhan put all this together very briefly this morning. So yes, this is our backdrop of where we're most fortunate to be able to wander for a whole month, just unfettered, just wander around in these beautiful pastime places of Vrindavan. And the sound backdrop, we can say, is actually this Damodarastakam. It's said that we should sing it 3 times a day. Generally in our mats, we sing it twice a day. But many devotees, they sing it morning, noon, and evening by offering a lamp. Why is it so celebrated? Why is this Damodarastakam so extraordinarily celebrated? Because, as Sanatana Goswami says, it's described in the preface on page 12, X11, if you look in the preface of the Damodarastakam book, that this pastime is described as Nitya Siddha. It's eternally manifest. So I've described this evening more about this point, but I'd like to touch on it because some of you may not watch that evening session. So this eternally perfect, it doesn't mean that the Astakam itself is part
Have we lost Maharaj or Tarun? Can you hear me?
No, yeah, I can hear you. We've lost Maharaj.
Okay, he'll be back. I'm just looking on page Roman numeral 12 for the reference, if I can find it. Yeah, it says, well, we're waiting for him to come back. It says, this Damodarastakam Shtava is narrated in the Padma Purana, where it is spoken by Sri Satyavrat Muni in the context of a conversation between Sri Narad and other sages headed by Sri Sanaka Rishi. In his commentary on this Sri Damodarastakam, Srila Sanatana Goswami Pad has stated, this is what Maharaj was saying, this prayer is Nitya Siddha, which means eternally perfect. It is manifested through Sri Satyavatra Muni and is capable of attracting Sri Damodar Krishna.
Yeah, so can you hear me now clearly?
Yeah, you're back. Brilliant. I just read that quote from Roman numeral 12 that you referred to.
Yes. So, yes, this is the nature of this Damodarastakam, that it's eternally perfect, but it's not part of the Gokul apricot Leela. It's like you don't find this Leela in the Govinda Lita, which describes the 8 yamas of the day. There is Nishanta Leela, Prata Leela, Purvana Leela, Madhyana Leela, Apurvana Leela, Shyam Leela, Pradosh Leela, Ratri Leela. There are all these 8 principal pastimes. So this doesn't fall into one of those Nitya Leelas, even though it's eternal. I'm saying this to prompt some perhaps discussion with the devotees, because every time we go into this Damodarastakam, we should go into it with a mood of anticipation. What new jewels will we be able to turn over today in this prayer? It's like it's ever fresh. Krishna is described as being Naveen Krishna. He's eternally fresh and youthful. Every time Sri Radhika sees Krishna, she wonders, who is this most beautiful boy? Krishna thinks the same when he sees Radhika. So similarly, something of a Nitya Siddha quality is eternally fresh. So this remarkable prayer, all of the verses are so beautifully linked together. So far, we've come through the first and the second verse. So in the first verse, in the first line, we substantiated the platform of honor and respect and Aishwarya, Namam Ishwaram Satchit Ananda Rupam. Who is this supreme Ishwara? Who is he in Tattva? It's described as Sarva Shaktiman and Jagat Ekanath and Nija Prabhu. This is the platform that we're working from. We have to, unless we understand this point about Krishna's Aishwarya, we will become deviated into a too much familiar Sahajya tendency. This is very, very important to appreciate, that the aspect of Aishwarya is running through even deeper in Braj, but it's covered by an immensity of Madhurya. So we should not look for familiarity until we are qualified for that familiarity. And that qualification will manifest by itself. Bhaktivedanta Swami Srila Prabhupada, he describes that this higher consciousness will be revived within the conditioned jiva by his sadhan bhajan, by his practice. Naturally, it will be revived. So we are in sadhan process. So in the first verse, we were describing, Satyabrat Muni is introducing us almost immediately in the second line to these beautiful Makara-shaped earrings that are rubbing against the cheeks of Krishna. Straight away, we've come from this very high, extraordinary level of honor to Krishna, and now we've come into the sweetness of Krishna's face, his personality. And then the second 2 lines are describing the Leela, and we describe that clearly, how Mother Yashoda is chasing Krishna. She caught him from behind, and Krishna is in fear. He's in real, stark fear of his mother. So this is extraordinary. So we read through this very carefully and began to churn the details of that. Even by reading these pages, it's not complete, it's not enough. So the devotees will realize that this is ongoing always. In the second verse that we describe, the second chapter, these are a description of Krishna's rubbing his eyes, ruddhantam muhur netra yugam mijancham, rubbing his eyes again and again, and why was he rubbing his eyes, etc. And we also discussed the nature of the pastime where the rope is 2 fingers too short. These Vadakalai and Tenakalai, the kitten philosophy, that's the kitten is carried by the mother and the monkey holds on to the mother monkey. So these 2 types of practices, this one puts in a lot of effort to get the required result, and the other is completely surrendered. So which way are we going? Are we going to be just totally, yes, everything is providence, I can't do anything, I'm helpless in the hands of the Lord? No, this is not our philosophy. We need both of these considerations. So Vadakalai and Tenakalai. And Srila Gurudev describes that, and we listen to that. nicely. And then, of course, we heard the rest of the pastimes when the trees came crashing down. But both of these verses, verse 1 and verse 2, are in a stage called Mantra Mai Upasana. It's focusing on a single pastime, this pastime of Dambanda Lila. And now we've come to the third verse, and now this is going to open up even more, where many, many verses are going to be tumbling into the heart of Satyabrat Muni. So also it's important to appreciate the identity of Satyabrat Muni, because previously I mentioned that he was the king that is described in the 8th canto of Srimad Bhagavatam, in the 24th chapter. This is how I was told by some very astute scholars in Vrindavan, who were with Gurudev all the time. But Madhav Maharaj, he told me just today that no, they are definitely two separate persons. There's Satyabrat Muni, who's a Muni, and there's King Satyabrat. So there's two personalities, not one. It's not the same person. So Satyabrat Muni is a different personality to that king that was described in the Chakshushmanvantara. So the descriptions of Satyabrat Muni's pastimes, etc., which age and yuga, etc., he was in, I don't know, and I haven't located it in any research that I've done in the Bhagavatam or Chaitanya Charitamrita or Sandarbhas, etc. It's not mentioned. So we can just appreciate that this great rishi was inspired at some point in time to have a vision of this in a trance. And another consideration is that my Gurudev has explained that this Damodarastakam was not written in one go. It took many, many years for this Astakam to manifest from Satyabrat Muni. Indeed, it even took thousands of years. So now we're starting to appreciate the significance of the stages that are going to be unfolded as the verses go through. So now we've come to the third verse. So now this third verse is demonstrating Swarasiki Upasana, many pastimes. And in this particular chapter, my Gurudev describes 12 different leelas. So now just see the context, the flow, and what is the force of the current. The force of the current is that Satyabrat Muni is determined to have his inner desire fulfilled, which is to see the conjugal pastimes of Sri Radha and Krishna. So this is the pastime that we know, or the vision that we appreciate in verse 8. So now we're on verse 3.
Maharaj, we can't
so
see
by
you,
his
by the
childhood
way.
past,
Maharaj, we can't see you, by the way.
yeah.
That's better. Yeah, we can see you now. Oh.
Haribol?
Yes,
Can you
Maharaj.
see and hear me now?
Yeah, you popped on. I'm going to turn my video off to give you more bandwidth. Carry on, Maharaj.
You could stop.
on.
If it happens again, I'll go off the white. Can you hear me?
Yeah, stranger, I
Haribol?
can hear you, yet you're on mute for some strange reason. Okay. Yeah, I can hear you.
I'm not on mute on my machine.
Okay,
Okay.
you're fine.
I'll just keep reading now until anybody stops me. Okay, I'm reading the translation.
Your video's gone off again, Maharaj, but it may be best given the bandwidth. Maybe keep, yeah, you're back on now. You're back on.
I'll take the video off for a while.
Okay.
Okay. Iti driksva lilabhya ananda kunde svagosham nimajantam akaipiantam tarishita jneshu vaktiya jidavam puna prema tastvam satavriti vande. This is the beautiful verse that our dear Ramananda Prabhu's just sung. So by his childhood pastimes such as this, Damodarastakam, he perpetually drowns all the residents of Gokul, his gopas, gopis, cows, calves, and so forth, who are all manifested by his pastime potency in pools of bliss. He thus informs those who have knowledge of his absolute divinity that only the pure and simple love of these devotees can conquer him. Again, hundreds of times I offer loving obeisances unto Sri Damodar Krishna. So very moving, beautiful third verse here. So Satyabrat Muni begins this verse with Iti Driksva Lilabhya to establish his worshipable Lord's unique glory. He accomplishes this by illustrating his wonderful character. In this verse, Iti is used to mean like this. Thus he begins, like this, by his Bhakta Vashyata. In this way, he reiterates it, is Krishna's nature to come under the control of his devotees. I'll try with the video again. Okay. Alternatively, it means by his Damodar Leela, and Ididrish B. Cha, by his supremely enchanting, extraordinary childhood pastimes, like Damodar Leela. You should mute yourself, Yashoda.
We can't see you, by the way, Marge.
I'll go off. Okay.
You went on and came off again.
Okay.
No, you're off. You're off. Now you're on.
Okay.
No, you're off again. I think you're pressing something without realizing it, maybe. Now you're on.
I'll leave it on and see what happens.
You're playing
Okay.
peekaboo pastimes of the Cowherd Boys.
No. Alternatively, Iti means by this Damodar Leela, and Idi Trishbis Cha by his supremely enchanting, extraordinary childhood pastimes, like Damodar Leela. He is immersing all the residents of Gokul in great bliss. The addition of Swa in the phrase Swa Lilabhi conveys the greatness of his own pastimes, or it conveys the uncommon excellence of the playfulness of his pastimes. This has been described in Srimad Bhagavatam 10.11.7 in statements such as the following. Gopi Bhishtobiti Nriyad Bhagavan Balavat Kvachit Udgayati Kvachin Mugdas Tadvashodaru Yantravat. The gopis would encourage Krishna to dance in various ways. They would clap their hands and say, if you dance, then we will give you a laddu. Although Krishna is Bhagavan, the supreme omnipotent Godhead and the master of all opulences, baby Krishna would dance for them like an innocent human child. Sometimes they would tell him to sing, and like an ordinary bewildered child, he would sing for them. Enchanted by them, he became like a wooden puppet in their hands. Bibharti kvachid agnapta pitakon mana padukam bahushepam chakuryate swanam cha pritim samudhan. This is from the Bhagavatam, chapter 11, verse 8. Sometimes the gopis would order Sri Krishna to bring them someone's shoes, wooden seats, measuring cups, or the weights used for scales. At such times, he would act as if he was unable to lift these articles and would stand there touching them, and then he would repeat, strike his arms to show his mightiness. By such gestures, he would fill his own kin with boundless joy. It was in sole reference to the above statements of Srimad Bhagavatam that Satyabrat Muni said Sri Krishna causes Svagosham, his own kin, the residents of Gokul, to be totally submerged, Nimajjantam, in a nectarine and incredibly deep pool of extraordinary happiness, Ananda Kunde. That is the indication of this verse from Srimad Bhagavatam. Swanam Pritim Sumudvahan. He thoroughly arouses deep love in his own dear kin. So this is the commentary of Srila Bhakti-Pragyan Keshav Maharaj that I'm reading now as a prelude to my Gurudev's commentary. Alternatively, the word Ghosh means to loudly proclaim the glory of something. Directing the word Ghosh either to himself, Swasya, or to his own, Swanam, the meaning becomes either by broadcasting his own glories or by broadcasting the glories of his gopas and gopis, certainly by becoming absorbed in the mood of spreading his extraordinary glories, as well as the glories of his own loved ones. Even Sri Krishna sinks in Ananda Kunda, and as a result, he feels the highest limit of happiness. In order to further describe the extraordinary qualities of Sri Krishna, of Sri Bhagavan, Sri Satyabrat Muni then says, by these pastimes, Sri Krishna is making it known, Akyaya Payantam, to all who are Tadiya Ishara Jeshu, who worship him as the supreme controller and the master of all souls, that he is himself controlled and defeated by the love of his pure devotees. Bhaktiya Jitavam. In other words, Krishna is declaring, I willingly become controlled by my bhaktas alone, who are intent on serving me with pure devotion. I am never controlled by those who are inclined to worship me while considering my supreme position and opulence. This is remarkable because in the first instance of all the devotees' practices, we are worshipping with great veneration and opulence that Supreme Lord Krishna. If we look at all the religions of the world, they only worship God in a mood of Aishwarya. And even as devotees, when we first arrive, even always, the devotee is always honoring that Supreme Lord as the highest personality, even though it may be internally appreciated in a much sweeter sense. Shri Rupa Goswami, he says the beautiful verse, Seva Sadak Rupena Siddha Rupena Chatrahi, that the Sadak has his external behavior, which is in accordance with the rules of Shastra, but he internal appreciation and rag towards Vrindavan internally. So the two are running synonymously. So these have to be reconciled by the individual in his eternal relationship with Krishna. I'll read on. Thus, the sage captures the meaning of the following statement from Srimad Bhagavatam. Darshyam stadvidam loka atmano britya vashyatam. Translation, Bhagavan Sri Krishna showed the community of those who know about his supreme position that he only remains under the full control of his loving servants. So this is a very, very high stage. But if we're fortunate enough to hear this, just to simply hear about it, to have it lodged in the archives of our consciousnesses, as we're practicing, as we're moving through our different areas and activities and sadhana practices, etc., we should appreciate that this is a reality, that Krishna will be controlled only by the fully loving mood of his dear servants. So the commentator, Sri Sanatana Goswami, personally explains the above statement of Bhagavatam as follows. Here, the word tad, which means about that or about him, is connected to Sri Krishna's position as Bhagavan. And when it is combined with vidam, knowledge of, it becomes knowledge of his position of Bhagavan. So actually, this is the description of a jnani. A jnani is always conscious of Krishna's position as Sri Bhagavan, that most worshipful personality. But the nature of the Brijvasis is that they don't see Krishna as Bhagavan. They see him in a relationship as like my son or my lover, or my dearest friend, etc. This sambandha in Braj is entirely different to that mood of seeing with knowledge of the Jnani. It's like Uddhav, he couldn't fully come into Braj because he couldn't think that the material friendship he had with Krishna was superior than the honor he had for Krishna. He was a Jnani Bhakta. There was always that honor that was, Krishna is describing in Chaitanya Charitamrita also, that this is like an obstruction. You'll remember that in that first chapter, we describe this, Aishwarya Janate Shabbat Jagat Mishrita, Aishwarya Stitila Prem Naki Mora Prita. This was from the Chaitanya Charitamrita 4, Adi Leela chapter 4, verse 17, that all the universe is filled with knowledge of my majesty, but love weakened by that sense of majesty does not control me. These are big, massive points. Even though we're reading through them very quickly, these are enormous stages of consciousness. That's why to reflect that this whole Astakam took thousands of years to compose. We're hearing it bang like that. Is that just the end of it? No, it's something for us to feed off for many, many years of contemplation. So this is why this Astakam is Naveen Krishna. It's ever fresh. And then Krishna also says in that Adi Leela chapter 4, if one regards me as the Supreme Lord and himself as subservient, I do not become subservient to his love, nor can it control me. So this remarkable instance of being controlled by Krishna's love to the extent of actually binding Krishna. This is the crux of this whole Astakam, is that it's going to demonstrate how Krishna is physically going to be bound by a rope, not just in our hearts by love, but actually by a rope by Mother Yashoda. This is astonishing. Thus, the meaning is clear. He is showing drishyams. What?
And as we discussed, you're talking about a Jnani Bhakta, not a Jnani.
Yes, yes, correct. Well done. Very good. Where did you learn that from?
From you, Maharaj.
Very good.
Often in shorthand, we say Jnani, but we mean Jnani Bhakta, not Jnani.
Yes, very good. You should always prompt me on that. So Jnani, tell us what a Jnani is.
A Jnani is somebody who's not acknowledging Krishna, or even Bhagwan actually, as the supreme personality of Godhead. They have knowledge maybe of liberation, but they have no knowledge of Krishna. Whereas a Jnani Bhakta, she has knowledge of Krishna as Bhagwan, but they acknowledge Krishna as Bhagwan. They don't have the Gopi or Mantri type of relationship with Krishna, where Krishna is not the supreme personality of Godhead.
Yes. Sometimes the Jnani is described, he worships the Brahman effulgence, which is actually impersonal. So the Jnani, he directs his attention in that place. Yes. So the distinction between a Jnani Bhakta and a Jnani is very, very great. So you should correct me if I just say Jnani. I mean Jnani Bhakta. In other words, the original Supreme Lord, Sri Krishna Chandra, is exhibiting that in every respect, he is only controlled by his loving servants in Braj. And among them, he is especially controlled by those in Unnata Ujjvala Ras. Oh, we've heard of Unnata Ujjvala Ras. We say every day, this Anapita Chirim Chirat Karunai Varatino Samara Vaitam Unnata Ujjvala Ras. This is what Chaitanya Mahaprabhu has come to taste. And Gurudev is mentioning this same expression, Unnata Ujjvala Rasa. This means brilliantly topmost rasa, the supremely pure humor of Madhurya Ras, transcendental amour. He is not controlled by devotees who worship him on the path of Aishwarya Bhakti, which is categorized by the mood of reverence, nor is he controlled by Jnanis, who know him to be the self-manifest, supremely powerful Lord, nor by those whose bhakti is mixed with Jnana. We know in the verse, Yashoda Prabhu recites it every day. Anya bilasita shunyam jnana karmadi anapritam. This gyan is being rejected by the serious sadhak. But there is another meaning of tadiyeshe jneshu bhakti jitavam. Sri Krishna only reveals akyai payantam, that he is willingly controlled, jitavam, by his loving devotees, only to those who have proper knowledge of such beloved devotees' exalted position. This is because bhakti, and especially its glories, are very confidential. So he does not reveal it to everyone. It is inappropriate to explain it to anyone who is not specifically acquainted with the exalted glories of the Vaishnavas, and who is only interested in impersonal knowledge. What will they think if you explain these facts to an impersonalist or a jnani? They will not get anything out of it. They will not appreciate it. Actually, they will probably commit some type of aparad towards it. From this perspective, the previously cited verse should be interpreted by connecting vidam and britya vashyate. Thus, the general meaning is tad vidam, those who know Sri Krishna's supreme position, become britya vashyate vidam, those who know that Sri Krishna willingly comes under the control of his loving servants. Therefore, Sri Satyabrat Muni prays, overwhelmed with incomparable, pure, loving devotion for you, Premata, I offer you Vandanam, my prayers of adoration, hundreds of times, Shata Avriti, to you, Tam, the Supreme Lord, I offer Vandanam again and again. Thus, in this verse, the sage wishes to say, among the limbs of bhakti, which are required for all devotees, I only pray to perform one special limb of Bhakta Vandana, to constantly express my adoration for Sri Bhagavan. I do not pray for knowledge of Sri Bhagavan's opulence or anything else. So now his vision of his appreciation of his personal desire is becoming exposed in the prayer, that he doesn't want this Aishwarya at all. He only wants to be submerged in this iti drikswa ilabhya ananda kunde, these kunds filled with pastimes. So now we come to my Gurudev's commentary. The Digdarshani Vritti. Sri Krishna's pastimes are lakes of inexhaustible bliss, in which he drowns the entire village of Gokul. The village of Gokul is known as Goshapali, which refers to the place where all the animals, birds, cows, gopas, and gopis loudly sing the pastimes of Krishna without cessation. It is constantly resounding with the calls of the gopis and the gopas. Milk the cows, untie the calves, bring the milk pail, and all is entirely for the pleasure of Sri Gopal Krishna. We remember my Gurudev is quoting here directly from the 46th chapter of the 10th canto, when Uddhav comes into Braj and he sees this spurti, and it's described the calling of the gops and the gopis to each other. Bring the cows. No, release the cows. Where is the milk pail? Now milk the cow. So all of these beautiful exchanges are going on. This is what Uddhav sees. And then remember, in that particular example, I described how then Krishna steps out of a doorway. And what does Uddhav do? He bends down and offers obeisances. And then the whole spurti folds, because people don't offer obeisances in that way in Braj. When Sri Krishna became a little bit bigger, he discovered that he could go beyond the doorstep leading out of the house. One day, when he and his big brother Balaram went outside, they saw that some bright red flowers had blossomed nearby. However, the flowers were surrounded by a fence of dry burr thorns, those very sharp thorns. Somehow they moved the thorny branches aside and went through to pick the flowers. Meanwhile, the thorny branches fell back into place, blocking their way out. How sweet. How will we get out of here, they wondered, and burst into tears. Mother Yashoda heard their loud sobbing and came out of the house. Finding them trapped, she managed to move the thorny branches to the side and take them out. Sometimes Krishna, but also Mother Yashoda, would scold them both at the same time for getting themselves caught in such a predicament. Sometimes Sri Krishna would hold on to the horns of huge bulls and swing on them. Other times he would become astonished when he saw himself reflected in the jeweled pillars of his home, and he would even try to speak with that reflection. We often quote this example. This is quoted by Srila Krishna's Kaviraj in Chaitanya Charitamrita. When Krishna sees his reflection, he wants to taste the beauty of that person. He wants to befriend that. He doesn't think he's ever seen a person in his life more beautiful than this. This is the supreme personality of Godhead, is having these types of feelings. So this is the moods that the sadhak wants to cultivate and develop. One day, his mother said, Krishna, go fetch a calf and we will worship him. Krishna found a calf and caught hold of him. But when he tried to bring him to his mother, the calf refused to move. Krishna struggled to bring him along, tugging and pulling all the way. He finally reached the house, but then he noticed a pot of butter hanging from the ceiling. His mouth began to water. He climbed on the calf's back, and taking hold of the pot, he began to empty its contents. Seeing his chance to escape, the calf fled from the spot, leaving Krishna dangling. Mai, Mai, he cried. Mother Yashoda, finding Krishna hanging in the air, took him down and scolded him. This is the Anand Kund. These are the beautiful childhood pastimes of Sri Krishna. Early each morning, the gopis used to crowd round Mother Yashoda's home just to see Sri Krishna. Sometimes some gopis would say, Krishna is so strong, while others would argue, no, Balaram is much stronger. How shall we definitely find out who is stronger? Let the two boys wrestle, and the winner will get a big lump of butter. On these occasions, just by seeing the butter, the two boys' mouths began to water, and they would start wrestling. The gopis siding with Krishna would clap their hands if he won, but if he lost, then the gopis of Baladev's side would clap victoriously. Sometimes the gopi would tempt Krishna with a laddu, saying, Kanaya, if you dance for us, we will give you this laddu. Putting his hand on his waist, he began to dance to the rhythm, tatai, tatai, and even sing a sweet little song. In various ways, the Braja gopis would make Krishna dance. He became just like their puppet, for he came under their full control. At other times, the gopis who came to visit Mother Yashoda would order Krishna, Krishna, bring us that wooden seat. Their darling little Krishna would try to lift the small seat, but when they saw that he could not, when they saw that he could not, they swelled with sweet affection for him. The same Sri Krishna, in his Varaha incarnation, lifted the entire earth on his tusks. Also, when Sri Krishna was a little older, he easily lifted Govardhan Hill on his little finger as if it were no more than a toy ball. But in his childhood pastimes in the same Brajadam,
Maharaj has disappeared again. I'm sure he'll be back imminently. You've disappeared, Maharaj. I'm going to turn my screen off. I think you should turn yours, turn your video off.
Can you hear me?
Yeah, I can hear you well, actually.
Okay. Although Krishna is the master of unlimited potencies, including his Gatana Agatana Shakti, which makes the impossible possible and the possible impossible. In Braj, he is unaware of his supreme absolute position. There he is an innocent and simple child, nourished and cared for by his affectionate mother. As befitting an obedient son, he brings his father's shoes, carrying them on his head, and considers, father will wear these shoes to attend the assembly of Gopas. What is the meaning of Itidrik Swalilabhya Ananda Kunde Swagosham Nimajantam? Sri Krishna's sweet childhood pastimes are an ocean of rasa. That ocean is inexhaustible and has no boundary, for it is absolutely unlimited. He drowns all the gopis, cows, calves, and the entire settlement of Braj in the vast ocean of these pastimes. Even he, in fact, drowns in the ocean of the sweetness of his own pastimes. Why does Sri Krishna perform these pastimes? Sri Satyabrat Muni answers this question in relation to Tadiyeshita Jneshu, those who always retain knowledge of Bhagavan's supreme position. This is to melt this supreme vision of Bhagavan in Aishwarya and overcome the sadhak with affection and sweetness. This is the ingredient to melt this hard Aishwarya Bhav, or this hard Gyan. But simultaneously, the external activities must be fully in accordance with the Dharma Shastras, etc. It's described that Raghunath Das, even though he's our Prayojan Acharya, it's described that he had the lines of Vaidhi, the lines of the rules and regulations were carved like stone within him. He would never for a moment transgress any shastric injunction. At the same time, he didn't have to follow externally all of the various rules and regulations because he already had utter respect for them. So it's imperative that we all are totally familiar with the correct behavior and etiquette, etc. And when we have that absolute familiarity, then there might come times when we can just discard it out of love and affection, when we don't have to hold on to it so strongly. These are very, very subtle points that the sadhak, the practitioner, has to appreciate. And unless we hear these descriptions, how will we ever be able to navigate through this labyrinth, so to speak, of the Aishwarya mood that comes initially and the absolute madhurya that we are aspiring for, to achieve? How are we going to get to that place? Not so easy.
I have a question from Jiva Pavna. You mentioned a Shakti that makes the impossible possible. Can you repeat the name of that, please?
Gatana Agatana.
Gatana Agatana. Is that in the book, or did you just mention it?
Yes, no, it's on page 60 at the bottom. Gatana Agatana Shakti. This is mentioned many times in Jaiva Dharma also. The impossible possible.
Is it the same Shakti that makes also the possible impossible, or is that Yogamaya?
Yes. No, it's the same. Yogamaya
so
holds,
like the seat, for example, that leader on bring me when the gopis are telling me. Yeah. Okay.
Yes.
That's Gatana.
Yes.
Gatana.
These are all incredible contradictions that we are trying to appreciate. And there's a very beautiful verse in this connection that the devotees might just reflect on for a moment. This is saying, Karmani ani hasya bhavo bhavasyate, durgashraya tari vayat pralayanam, kalatmano yat pramod yuteshram, swatman rate kidyati dir vidam iha. This is spoken again by Uddhav in the 3rd canto. Karmani ani hasya bhavo bhavasyate. That Krishna works and he doesn't work. He's born and he's not born. He's fear personified, and yet he takes shelter in a fortress from his enemies. He's the most renounced person, and yet he lives with 16,108 queens. Then it's saying, how are sages bewildered by these apparent contradictions? This makes the sage unsteady when he reflects on the contradictions within the Shastra between these Aishwarya moods and the Madhurya moods. So these are all being brought out, reconciled, and explained in these verses that our dear Satyabrat Muni has gifted to us. And through the auspiciousness of this month of Kartik, we are encouraged to read these verses daily as our bhajan, and so much can be, so many jewels can be gleaned from here. As I'm reading, if anyone wants to open up any sort of discussion on these different points, don't hesitate and we can thicken our appreciation.
Yeah, just send a quick Zoom chat message to me. Just unfolding Jiva Pavana's question then, presumably Gatna is a Shakti of Yogamayas, is that right?
Yes, correct. So Krishna, he is the master of that Shakti ultimately.
Chutananda has a question, Maharaj.
Yes, I see.
Well, Namami Sarang Satchidananda Rupam, we are to keep in mind that Krishna is the Supreme Personality of Godhead, so we don't become Sahajya. And then the great statement of Narayan Maharaj that I'm here to tell you he's not. So this is stretching me to the point of breaking.
This is why we have to read this every single day.
Yeah.
Exactly, Prabhu. It's stretching us all. I was just asked a question before I came on this Zoom, exactly the same question. You know, the devotee struggling just to follow the principles, and yet he's hearing all about Radha and Krishna's conjugal pastimes. He's saying very sincerely, how am I supposed to connect with that? How am I supposed to view that? So I was explaining him exactly what Rupa Goswami says, Seva Sadak Rupena, Siddha Rupena Chatri, that internally we are praying for that connection internally, that confidential connection. But externally, we are following very strictly all the rules and the regulations of Vaidhi Bhakti. Otherwise, it's Sahajya, Achyuta Prabhu, Achyutananda. If we try to bring our inner feelings into the external world, what is the point of that anyway, except for Pratishta's sake, to get some fame and adoration or something of that nature? These feelings should be kept internally. There's a distinction, what you present to the world and actually what your meditation is focused on. At the same time, as we practice more carefully, we're able to incorporate those two qualities of the Aishwarya and the Rag internally and externally. We're able to actually connect them more fully together so that we can present to the general public at least an indication of this path. But it has to be done very carefully and with guidance. If we try to just run in there, we may just trip over and break our heads.
Like the gopis do everything perfectly for their husbands, right? But they're meanwhile
Very good.
Yeah.
Very good. Yes,
And I think
absolutely.
Achutananda just hit it on the head by saying this is moving me to breaking point. Because I think the
Yes.
whole point is there's part of us
It's
that
to
needs
break.
to break.
No, the whole point is to break.
Yeah,
We
need to break.
The whole point is to break. Why not? Yeah.
What's
Yes,
that?
he's breaking. Yes.
There's that statement of Bhaktisiddhanta that every morning you should beat your mind with a stick, and every night beat it with a shoe.
These are beautiful tattvas encased in very sweet leelas. You know, this was the point that I wanted to make clear. We're talking about these heart-melting leelas, but at the same time, we're in a conditioned state. Are we able to honor them sufficiently? Let me read more. A Tattva Gyani sees Brajendra Nandan Sri Shyam Sundar as the source of all incarnations and the essence and unlimited and ultimate limit of Godhead. They know him as the possessor of all six opulences in their fullness and the Supreme Lord who has the power to make the impossible possible. Devotees such as Narad and the four Kumaras have full knowledge of Sri Krishna's true position. Through these pastimes, Sri Krishna is explaining to them, although I possess the potency to make the impossible possible, I am nonetheless controlled by the residents of Braj. I am simply playing here in the mood of an ignorant child. Queen Kunti is astonished. She can't comprehend this. She has so much affection for the Lord, but in Aishwarya, like a Gyani. Iti driksva lilabhya. His uncommon childhood pastimes, like this Damodar Leela, are supremely charming. One day, a fruit seller from Mathura came to Braj to sell her fruit. She had heard of the preeminent sweetness of Sri Krishna's pastimes in Gokul and had become exceedingly eager to see him directly. Although she came to Braj often, she had never gotten the chance to see Krishna. He was either asleep or in the lap of his mother. At other times, he was surrounded by his friends or busy playing inside his home. She tried again and again, but was always unable to see him. Direct vision of Sri Krishna is easily available to the residents of Braj, but it is quite rare for the people of Mathura. All of this is supposed to inspire greed within our hearts, simply that quality of greed. Yes, do I want this sufficiently to perform the practice to attain it? Isn't this the essence of what we're hearing? And that greed is the quality of Rag Marg. Satyabrat Muni, he has it. He's sharing it in this way. My Gurudev is also trying to inspire us for that enthusiasm. It's this utsaha that is going to crack through and bring out, revive, Bhaktivedanta Swami Prabhupada says, our true spiritual nature and identity. Still, the heart of the fruit seller became so full of anxiety that she resolved, if I do not see Krishna today, I will not return to Mathura. The sadhak's resolve should be exactly the same. He should think day and night, I will execute the limbs of devotion as instructed by Sriman Mahaprabhu and Srila Rupa Goswami with love. I will chant a fixed number of Sri Hari's names and serve Sri Guru and the Vaishnavas. Every day I will study Srimad Bhagavatam and other devotional literatures. Every day I will recite Gopi Geet, Venu Geet, Brahmara Geet, and Yugal Geet. But recite it with love. Gurudev specifies this at the beginning, not with a mood of anything other than that. If it's done with a mood of wanting to crack the gates of heaven like a yogi, this won't bear the desired result. If I come across a Rasik Vaishnava, I will give my life to serving him. I will visit the places where Sri Radha and Krishna perform their confidential pastimes in the groves and forests of Braj. I will pray very piteously there and recite hymns and prayers that are full of longing. Then Sri Krishna will surely give me his darshan. He is not far away. Krishna is as close as our heart's beat is to us. Having made her vow, the fruit seller came to Nanda Maharaj's cowherd settlement and wandered about near his house. She began crying out, "Come, take fruits. Far low, take fruits. Come, take mangoes, bananas, and guavas. Far low, far low." But within moments, she became so absorbed in thinking about Krishna that instead of calling out the names of the fruits, she called out, "Come, take Gopal, Govinda lo, Madhava lo, Damodar." At first, she had been balancing the basket of fruit on her head with one hand, but eventually she forgot to hold the basket altogether. It kept from falling only due to her natural expertise. Finally, she sat down before the doorstep of Nanda's house. When Sri Krishna heard the cries of the fruit seller, he could not remain sitting quietly on his mother's lap, so he climbed down and went to the nearby mound of grain. After taking as much grain as he could hold in his joined palms, he started towards the fruit seller, but his hands were so tiny that all the grain fell from them as he walked. When he reached the fruit seller, all he had left were the few grains that were wedged between the palms of his fingers. He poured them into her basket and demanded, "Oh, give me some fruit." The fruit seller became completely enchanted by the beautiful form of little Krishna and just sat there looking at him for some time. The import of this pastime is that unless someone is intensely eager to see Sri Krishna and is absorbed in remembering him, just as the fruit seller was, he does not give them his darshan. Sri Krishna only gives his darshan to those sadhaks who desire nothing but to see him and serve him. In other words, he only appears before those who have become completely free from anarthas. So that may seem a high stretch for the conditioned souls wallowing in the darkness of material illusion. Nevertheless, we have amazing support from Guru, from Sachinandan Gaurahari, and principally from the holy sound vibration of the holy name of the Lord. These are sufficient to pull the consciousness of the conditioned soul all the way towards this very place that's been described. Really, otherwise, our process has no value if it couldn't give this fruit. When the fruit seller returned to external consciousness, she said, "Lala, my darling baby boy, I will give you fruit only if you sit on my lap just once and call me Ma." Little Krishna carefully looked in all directions to make sure no one was watching. When he was sure no one would see, he jumped onto her lap. Of course, the fruit seller is somewhat of a lower caste than Krishna is used to being with. She's from Mathura for a start, and her occupation is the fruit seller. So Krishna wouldn't want to be seen being so familiar with such a person. This is just the nature of the environment where Braj is like that. And then Krishna says, "Ma." And then quickly he jumped off again. "Give me fruit," he said. All of the deeper desires within the heart of the fruit seller had now been fulfilled. She wanted to give Krishna all of her fruit, but she could only give him as much as he was able to hold in his tiny arms and hands. When Kanaya returned to where Mother Yashoda was sitting in the courtyard, he placed the fruit in her veil. "Lala, where did you get these fruits from?" she asked. Krishna simply pointed towards the door. Mother Yashoda became delighted to see such succulent, tasty fruits. She began to distribute them to all the gopis present. But amazingly, even though there were only a few fruits, the quantity did not diminish. When Krishna left the fruit seller near the doorstep of his house, she completely lost external awareness. Sri Krishna had stolen her heart, and she simply sat in the very spot until a gopi passing by shook her and brought her back to external consciousness. She slowly picked up her basket of fruit, placed it on her head, and then set off for Mathura. As the fruit seller walked along the banks of the Yamuna River, she realized that her basket had become heavier than before. When she set it down and looked inside, she was struck with wonder. Her basket was filled with a variety of valuable jewels. She picked up the basket, threw it into the Jamuna, and burst into tears. This is the bhakti of this fruit seller. Krishna has cheated me, she cried. I have been completely deprived of his real mercy. Overwhelmed by love for Sri Krishna, she lamented bitterly and never returned to her home. When Sri Krishna steals anyone's heart, invariably this becomes their condition. And there's a verse here, Evam Vrata Svapriya Nam Kritya Jatanu Rago Drutya Chita Uchai Hasyati Ato Roditi Rota Gayati Unmad Van Nityati Loka Bhaya. This is from the 11th canto. Saintly people who have firmly devoted themselves to serving Bhagavan with deep love constantly engage in kirtan of their most beloved names of Krishna. When deep attachment, anurag, arises in them, their hearts thoroughly melt and they become mad in love of God. They laugh and cry loudly. Agitated by love, they sing about their Lord in sweet voices, and just like madmen, without a trace of shyness, they dance and sing, unaffected by the opinions of ordinary people. So in fact, this is what the devotees do. We wear pink and white dresses and we go on the street and we just dance all over the place and sing our hearts out. So we are demonstrating this uninhibited nature directly through our Sankirtan. This is, the devotees are encouraged from day one to run on the street publicly and chant the names of the God, of the Lord. Isn't it? Isn't this what we already do? The evil, so that's the end of that fruit seller story. Srila Gurudev describes that in even more detail at different times. He says, where did that fruit seller go? What was her final destination? She achieved Vraja Prem because she rejected those jewels. She instantly threw them away. So like the practitioner, you may be making some progress along. Then all of a sudden, this Taranga Rangini, these waves of auspiciousness of Bhakti Devi herself can start to manifest in the home of the sadhak in all kinds of different ways, opulences. Are you going to pay attention to those? Is that going to fill your heart with a feeling of success? Or are you going to see that as completely secondary to your path and journey? These are hard questions. Most of you I'm talking to, I think, are working in the material world. I don't think there are so many people who have cut those bonds. So we have to consider all these things. I'm just looking at everyone's name, but I don't know everyone here. But these are deep considerations for us. These are all the prayers of Satyabrat Muni for our constant consideration through this whole month of Kartik. They're to lay some foundational thoughts for us to consider and meditate on. Now, Gurudev will describe about Putana, the evil demoness Putana, who would murder small children and drink their blood, beautifully disguised herself as a mother and entered Braj, intending to kill baby Krishna. Jiva Goswami describes Putana as eating small children like one would eat piles of rice. That's how many small, I mean, how evil is this demoness? Big time. Despite her wicked deceit, merely on the basis of her motherly appearance, Sri Krishna granted her a position as a real nursemaid in Goloka. And in exchange for a morsel of worthless chipped rice, just see what he gave Sudama Vipra. Then what will he not give the fruit seller who was ready to give him all her fruit. Even four-headed Sri Brahma, the creator of the universe, cannot imagine the answer to this question. Lord Brahma says, and there's a long Sanskrit verse here, I won't try and chant it. He says, O Master, who is most worshipful, even for the demigods, now my mind is becoming bewildered by a doubt. How will you be able to reward the residents of Braj for their service? You are the condensed form of the highest benediction. There is no reward superior to obtaining you. But even if you give your very self to the Brijbasis, you will not be freed from your debt to them, because you have given even yourself to Putana. She was extremely cruel at heart. Yet by deceitfully appearing before you in the form of a virtuous nursemaid, she has obtained you. Even her relatives like Agasura and Bakasura have now obtained you. How can you give the same reward to the Brijbasis who have given you everything? They have offered you their homes, wealth, and relatives. They have even offered their own bodies, children, life, and mind, everything at your lotus feet. So that's the translation of the verse that Lord Brahma is saying to Krishna. Gurudev continues, every day Sri Krishna would perform beautiful, sweet pastimes like these and immerse the residents of Braj in an ocean of bliss. There are those who know him as the Supreme Personality of Godhead and the controller of all others. They know him as the possessor of all potencies, as the causeless original cause of all other causes, as the Supreme Being who has no equal, what to speak of a superior, and as he who makes the impossible possible. Yet by these pastimes, he is showing such knowledgeable personalities that he can only be controlled by bhakti. This is the conclusion. Where is our bhakti? Where is our sincere devotion in reality? Is it there? At least we're getting a window into what it is. What is the nature of Braja Prem? This is what we're hearing. What is the nature of this Prem that I want to impress into my consciousness, to aspire for in some future birth? But I want to, and how enthusiastic am I to want that? How much real enthusiasm to just to please Krishna is there in my heart? How do we please Krishna? By pleasing Guru. Guru is Krishna. Sakshatavitre na samasta shastra. Guru is directly Krishna in this world. That is the ambassador from
Raj,
the
can I
Lord.
ask a question?
What?
So we're told that to develop bhakti, you need sadhu sangha, sadhana, and seva. And at the same time, sometimes I hear that seva can almost be like, if not performed adequately, can be like the same as karma. So how do we distinguish and ensure so that we are cultivating this bhakti? When we're doing seva, we're doing bhakti, we're not doing karma.
It's always an internal consideration of my motivation. We have to run it constantly. Why am I doing that? I mean, not just once a day, not even twice a day, but probably 20 or 30 times a day if I'm performing some various savas. Am I doing this in a really, what is my motivation? And we should be examining that motivation constantly, just like Dhruva Maharaj. He's a Sakam Bhakta, right? What was his motivation? To get a kingdom greater than his great-grandfather, greater even than Lord Brahma. That was his motivation. Nevertheless, he still got that desire fulfilled, but he also had darshan of Krishna. He was also given, prem, but of a different gradation. So we have to consider this constantly. Does Jiva Pavana Prabhu have a better answer to this?
Before he does, can I just comment on that and take it to another stage? If you're a prominent preacher, for example, and you started out your preaching in a very pure way, but then you find on examination some pratishta creeping in to that seva, then do you give up the preaching, or do you try and purify it? If it's the latter, how do you do that? While still engaging the thing that's bringing out an anartha.
Because we have to examine, why am I doing this? Why am I doing this? If I recognize, oh, I'm only doing this because I like the pats on the back. I'm only doing this because I like the apparent external rewards that it seems to bring. People honor me, etc., etc. But what sort of shallow taste is that ultimately? So one has to mature on his progress, in his journey, and he has to put those that pratishta aside. It's been described in Manashiksha like the urine of a donkey, actually accepting that. That's how it's described. So we have to hear these instructions regularly and daily. And if we have good association, if we have friends, they will help us to perceive that. If someone is, if you, because very often we can see someone else's faults easier than our own. And if we have a specific, a close enough association with a friend, and they can actually say to us, hey, you're getting pretty puffed up now, then we can, rein in and start to examine is my motivation to please Krishna, or is my motivation again simply coming from a selfish point of view to please myself and my senses? So when I reach that stage, Yashoda, I'll be able to explain it to you more clearly, because I'm still well and truly attached to everything, all the results and so on. So I can just say the words, but if anybody else has any comment about that. I mean, it's very easy for us always to see in someone else. For example, someone might say, oh, a sannyasi, because it's very obvious, because they're usually on the stage most of the time, doing all the preaching, etc. But this pratishta is going to manifest in any area, in a grihasta or anybody, this putting ourselves at the center, because this is the number one anartha. What does Bhakti Rakshak Sridhar Maharaj said? He says, why do we have a false ego at all? It's to protect us from the horror of our absolute insignificance. We are genuinely insignificant in the eyes of the Lord. At the same time, we have a service, a speciality in relationship to the Lord. So again, it's this dichotomy of these two areas to adjust and to reconcile to. But again and again and again, I will keep on saying that simply by carrying on the process of chanting as sincerely as I'm able to, then all of these discrepancies will be ultimately reconciled. Because mercy from a higher quarter, Yashoda, has to come to purify these very deep, subtle anarthas that are there, where I'm looking for my own agenda rather than the service to the Lord or service to Guru. I have to be reminded again and again and again of this. If anyone else wants to comment on that, please feel free to do so.
The reality, Maharaj, is it's often quite mixed. So whenever you're serving, there'll be a mixture of motives. And
yeah,
so
well, this is the process. This is the process. It's always mixed until and gradually, we're becoming less and less mixed. We're mixed with gyan. We're mixed with bhukti. We're mixed with mukti. We have all of these considerations constantly coming to us, and our whole process is to become purified of these distractions. And how to do that is to hear constantly this vikriditam brajavadubi itam cha vishnu shradan vitu nushrunyat arthavaranya bhaktim param bhagavati prati labhya karmam hridrogam asava pinoti akcharena dira. That first we hear vikriditam, the playful, beautiful pastimes of Krishna, And then we have kirtan of those. That means we speak, we preach about them. And then shravana will manifest. This is the process. And it's saying bhakti pradilabhyam, that bhakti will manifest, but it will manifest after we've heard about Krishna. First, we have to hear. It's not that bhakti is going to manifest first, and then we're going to hear. No, that's rubbish. First, we hear about the sweet pastimes of Krishna. It's like I've often described in Upadeshamrita, for example. I mean, the first verse you say each day, Yashoda, Vacho Vegam Manasa Kroda Vegam. But unless you understand the 11th verse of where it's intending to bring our consciousnesses to, which is Radha Kund, and service as a manjari even in Radha Kund, the last 3 verses is the goal. Unless we immerse ourselves in these last 3 verses, the conclusion, then the first verses seem like, a very difficult sadhana to practice if you haven't got the goal clearly in mind. So I think this is what Bhaktivedanta Narayan Goswami is irrevocably giving us. And this whole Vrindavan Parikrama is giving us that. It's giving us the prayojan, it's giving us Vrindavan itself, it's giving us this Damodarastakam. It's giving us all these leelas, all these amazing leelas that we're getting from this journey to replace all of the material rubbish that we spin around in our minds, in this illusory world. Srila Gurudev used to say many times, how do you get air out of a pot? You put something into it. So we are trying to submerge our consciousnesses in these leelas, which will mean all the rubbish will go out of our minds, our consciousness like that.
I'd like to add one more thing, and then please carry on reading, because it's very beautiful. I think when I was speaking about this with somebody yesterday, I think when one is serving, it puts one in contact with a lot of other people, and how you react to other people can be is a good, very kind of non-illusory way of knowing where you're at. So if you can detect envy or anger or any of these negative emotions, you kind of know where you are on the path of bhakti. One of the dangers of modern techniques is that we can sort of make these more pleasant, but not through bhakti, not through what you're saying, through hearing. So what I'm getting from this is the importance of making sure bhakti is the center of our medical protocol, if you like, that we're hearing, that we're taking the right medicine, and then we won't even have to re-engineer the way we respond to people. It will be natural, because that compassion, that tolerance, that equanimity will naturally be there, because we're bathing in bhakti for Krishna.
Very good. Very good. I like what you just said. Very nice indeed. Yes, that's true. That. Yeah. Somebody's saying something?
We got Mahabodhi.
Mahabodhi, yeah.
I was thinking after hearing all this that in Narottam Das Thakur and Prema Bhakti Chandrika was so emphatic about hearing the transcendental pastimes, especially between Krishna and the Vraja-yavis, that it surpassed even the platform of so much bhakti gyan, in that it's so included without that hearing, chanting the holy name, hearing these transcendental pastimes in association with advanced pure devotees is the path, more so than I know in the beginning stages we're out trying to learn all the different tattvas. Not that they're not important, but Narottam Das Thakur firmly fixed in his writings the must hear these pastimes constantly. And so, as you were stating, and Srila Gurudev seemed to give everyone this opportunity in the Parikrama, but also concentrating, if we don't hear these transcendental books and these pastimes, then we still sort of remain aloof from actually developing a sambandha with Radha and Krishna and the residents of Vraja. So I was appreciative of your points on that, but it was also confirmed, confirmed by our advanced acharyas. Yes.
Totally. Thank you, Mahabodhi. Thank you. Yes, absolutely. We have to hear this. Vikriditam Brajabadubit Vishnu. Unless we're hearing constantly. This is the whole description of the 10th canto. The 10th canto is simply descriptions of Krishna's sweet pastimes, especially the first 40 chapters before it shifts over to Dwarka. But all of these pastimes we're hearing about Krishna's Balya Lila, his Boganda Lila, his extraordinary pastimes. We will pray that a greed will be inspired to hear more and more and more of these pastimes. Never satiate. That's the dynamic of the pastimes. You never get enough. It's like I said at the beginning of starting to read this book. We can read it so many times and it's never sufficient. And this whole Dambanda Lila, it's never sufficient just to hear it once or twice or even 20 or 30 times is not enough. We just want to hear it continually, which is what we're given this opportunity in Kartik. For the whole 30 days, every single day, sometimes twice a day, we're hearing this Damodar Lila, extraordinary,
So
to replace
how,
the lower.
I have one more question if you want, if you can take it. How do you transition? And here in the Damodar Lila, primarily is in Bal Lila with young Krishna. How is he transitioning from this meditation, which you said took many, many thousands of years even to get this, into the development of, in the last verse, where he's talking about association and into the pastimes and save of Srimati Radhika?
That's the whole dynamic of the Astakam. Don't go too far ahead. That's where we're going. That's the extraordinary nature. Because in the next verse, what is it? Varam Deva Moksham. Then he starts to reject so many things. He's chucking them out. You know, he's getting rid of a whole lot of baggage in the 4th verse. And then he's coming into his fine-tuned vision in the 5th verse. He doesn't want just Balya Gopal. He wants to just see the face encircled by beautiful. So he's bringing us through this intensity. And then he gets to the 6th verse, this Sankirtan. He starts chanting the names of the Lord to increase the opportunity to reach the higher stages of Madhurya. And then even in the 7th verse, he's talking in a familiar way about Nalagriva and Manikurvera. He's talking about them. And only then in the 8th verse, then he comes to mention Sri Radhika. But it's a process, Prabhu, isn't it? It's a process, a sequence through the verses.
So this is somewhat like a Brihad Bhagavatamrita, in that, you know, as the different levels of Sanatana Goswami is taking on, this is similarly the different levels up to come to the platform of Radhadasyam. But can you start, or some devotees able to start farther down the line than having to go through, you know, Bal Krishna and then coming, you know, getting into more rather from reverential.
But it's all wonderful. There's nothing that's not wonderful about it. It's all part of the entirety of the Supreme Lord. And we may eventually want just to focus on a more exclusive appreciation, but nevertheless, all of it. I mean, I would consider my Gurudev so rasic, yet he totally adored reading through the 1st, 2nd, 3rd, 4th verses of this Damodarastakam. It wasn't like he was rushing to get to the 8th verse particularly. He's already seated in that place. But how it unfolds and how we can share this also with others. It's like, for example, if you want to present in your teachings and your preaching the Ras Lila, where do you begin? I personally think it's a very good idea to begin with all the demons of Vrindavan, to bring people through that road first. That's not going to make anyone feel uncomfortable. If you start describing Vyomasura, Agasura, you know, Pralambasura, all these personalities, the demons of Vrindavan, bring them into Vrindavan first, make the flavor of Vrindavan. And then in the 10th canto, it hits the rainy season. Everything becomes like purified with the rains. And what's the first chapter after the rainy season? It's Venugit. And then you start getting into more confidential descriptions of Krishna's pastimes. And then the next one is Krishna stealing the clothes of the young Kumaris, you know. So then the 10th canto itself, it unfolds this whole process by itself, just like this Astakam is unfolding towards taking shelter of Radhika. The 10th canto is exactly the same dynamic. And what happens when you reach like the 40th chapter practically, then suddenly it zips off to Mathura. And then you have to reconcile, yes, most of the world actually want and are concerned with the Aishwarya moods. It's only a few that want to linger in Vrindavan. Even Shukadev Goswami himself doesn't really want to go to Mathura, because a few chapters later, in chapter 46, he goes back to Vrindavan with Uddhav. And there's two descriptions, 46 and 47 chapter, where Shukadev is describing Uddhav in Vrindavan and Brahmaragit. He can't, it's as if he can't pull himself away from Vrindavan. But then he has to surrender, and then he goes to Dwarka and all the Dwarka pastimes and so on. But
so that
it's
no, go ahead. I didn't want to stop you going.
It's because of personality and Narayan Maharaj, who are with such enthusiasm about Braja Prem and Braja Dham, that we have any interest at all. It's there in potential for us to aspire for. If we have that aspiration genuinely, if that aspiration can be kindled within us by someone who is so inspired by that himself, that's sufficient to carry us. My Gurudev said to me, I think I've shared it even on this Zoom at one point, I asked him about I said, you're telling us all these things about Uddhav being a Jnani Bhakta. How am I expected to go higher than Uddhav? And my Gurudev looked at me and he said, really serious, he said, you are like clay. I can mold you however I like. So this goes into a whole nother topic of inherent or inherited, etc. But at the same time, we should just consider this. What is the capability of such a powerful Rasik guru that you've associated with, Mahabodhi Prabhu? You associate with my Gurudev in Vrindavan itself. He's touched something in your heart eternally. You can never be freed from it. It'll always be there. And if you want to open it out and go more into it, then you will listen regularly to this Damodarastakam and cultivate these things with great faith, knowing that Prabhupada and Gurudev are non-different in this sense, that they are part of Mahaprabhu's mission to bring us to Braja Prem. Mahaprabhu hasn't come to give Vaidhi Bhakti. He hasn't just come to give Bhakti. He's come to give Bhakti Ras. Why shouldn't I try for that? Even though I'm utterly, utterly unqualified, so unqualified. But if I make an attempt, just like if a child makes an attempt at something, then immediately the parents and the well-wishers will assist the child. So I'm depending on my well-wishers, our Guru Vargya, to assist me at every step. But we independently have to make the effort, that road. We first of all know, like Chutananda Prabhu understands, to take shelter solidly of Nam, without taking shelter of this in a serious fashion. If you chant like 16 rounds a day, then what's that going to do? It's going to keep you out of Maya, basically. But then if you chant like 32 rounds a day, then you start to sort of feel the respect of being a devotee, an enthusiast. And what is big if you chant 40 rounds a day? What about 64? And as you increase your time that you spend with Sri Nam, then your mood as being actually a devotee starts to develop. You start to feel, yes, I have some. My Gurudev used to say one time at the end of a Parikrama, he said, don't think you don't have any bhakti. If you don't have any bhakti, what sort of guru am I? If you walk away from this Parikrama and you think, well, I have no bhakti, I'm so humble, mumble, stumbling into pillars. No, appreciate what you do have. we do have the most amazing personalities walking beside us. We have Bhaktivedanta Swami Srila Prabhupada. We have Bhaktivedanta Srila Narayan Maharaj. We have Bhaktivinoda Thakur. Don't think he's so distant and far away. We have Srila Gaurkishore Das Babaji. We have Narottam. You're just bringing him into our conversation. All of these personalities, you just sing their names. They're there. They're alive. They never die. They're always there. And they're always ready to help foolish people like me and exalted souls like yourselves. You know, we just got to call on them, especially through the chanting. This is the process that Mahaprabhu's given. It's so simple. Even a fool can do it. It's not difficult.
So I had 2 points with
you. What is the difficulty? What is the difficulty? That's the title of a book, I think, that's coming, right? What is the difficulty? What is the difficulty?
So I was thinking in your statements, there are so many different points, but also Rupa Goswami started in Radha Krishna Gano Desha Deepika in explaining a lot of the personalities that you'll find later in the 10th canto. And in some of these, he says as one of the places also to begin, besides the Srimad Bhagavatam and who's who. But then one of the points that you made was, you know, if you read Gopal Champu and the platform where Narada is speaking to Krishna just before he has to leave Vrindavan, about all the things he has to do. And from that point going forward through the whole book, you see how Krishna just wants to go to Braj. Everything he has to do is secondary to his desire to affiliate, to go back to Braja with all of his, where his heart is with all the devotees. So these things like make indelible currents in one's heart, and appreciating as we hear more and more, it rolls out. Even how I remember Bhaktisiddhanta used to, when they were talking about the separation of Radha and the gopis from Krishna, that it was also said, well, what about Krishna? Krishna's also suffering these great in lamentation from the Brajabasis. And so it opens up a whole, you know, your heart has to open up to be able to, you know, understand and gradually, you know, take these messages into the heart. And then once one does that, then it, like you said, it can't go away. Even if we have very little advancement, it still indelibly stays in your heart and your appreciation, and hopefully your sambandha increases, all by the mercy of our Guru Varga. There's no doubt. You know, so Srila Gurudev told me I must read these books by the Goswamis, and I was feeling so unqualified, and I still unqualified. But the taste that he's giving us is, he'd asked me one time, so how will you repay me? And I said, we can't, but still we have to try. And I think that's also your message, is that these great, you know, Manjari Bhagavat preachers, somehow or other we've come into their association, and even a little of their association has, you know, changed the direction of our hearts, just like a pinball game. When you hit it and all of a sudden the trajectory goes in another direction, simply by their mercy upon us, that we're able to even hear some of these things. And as you're so eloquently describing these pastimes, I'm thinking, oh, what great benefit and empowerment that Gurudev has even given to you, to be able to, you know, give so many thousands of devotees all over the world the opportunity to appreciate, you know, Parikrama, when we can't go personally for the most part. So such, you know, these are all the extended glories of our Guru Varga, as being empowering others to show this mercy and continue this sampradaya moving toward Radhadasyam. So much appreciative.
Achyutananda Prabhu, that's something.
Yeah, that makes it all clear, because I also thought this Damodarastakam is all Balya Lila, but at the end it's the Namo Radhika. But what's making it clearer now to glue my head back together, the first verse is Ishwara Satchidananda. But then that's the establishment. Then we're going to go up, 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 and no,
Actually,
no, it's not.
Yes, yes. To
Yeah.
draw like a staircase of this astakam would be, you know, I must get some graphic artist, because it's really astonishing to see it progress. You know, it has a tune to it. It has a rhythm to it. It has a conclusion. It has, like I said, there's a flow. Even in our Guru Vastakam, for example, that we sing every single day, you know, we have 4 verses glorifying Guru, basically. And in the 5th verse, we come straight to the very heart of Raganuga Bhakti. And then the 6th verse, Nikunja Yuna Rati Keli Siddhai, like in the center. So all of these astakams, if we open them right out, we see what treasures they are, what jewels they are. But this particular Damodarastakam is exceptional, because it takes us from Dasya Ras, or almost like Shanta Ras, actually, you know, initially, right the way through to honoring Sri Radhika, and in such powerful, clear stages that can be unpacked. Actually, reading this whole book regularly is, you have the hard copy there, Achyutananda Prabhu?
I have a, not with the Tika of Gurudev, no.
Oh, we should get you this book. It's because the way Gurudev unpacks everything, all of these very profound questions that we're talking about, my Gurudev addresses everything. As you see, like Jiva Pavana was saying the other day, it goes from Aishwarya to Madhurya, then Aishwarya again, then Madhurya. It seems to go from one to the other, just as our minds seem to go from one place to another. In 1 minute, we'll be absorbed in the sweetness and the beauty and the flavor. And the next minute, we have to attend to some material activity. And straight away, we have to reconcile it and put it into place. So my Gurudev is really walking us through this in a very remarkable way. He's saying in the next sentence here, what kind of bhakti can control him? So this is the next topic that we're probably going to leave till whenever we meet again. But now it's going to be describing many other devotees, etc. So we're going to slip back for a moment into an Aishwarya consideration out of the Leela. So this balancing, and how can we balance without the current of the Hare Krishna mantra and kirtan, etc. But I was thinking from Mahabodhi Prabhu's, what he was sharing tonight, and you also, and Yashodananda, is that without this type of association, how can any of us really move forward? You know, this, even though it's limited because it's virtual, but if we get over that and are actually can connect with each other and appreciate that this particular Zoom Sangha can have tremendous impact and influence in our progress, you know, we need to think of different ways to keep this going, is what I'm actually sharing. You know, these types of topics, but everybody should be.
Maharaji, we're kind of ready to close now,
Yep.
or do you want to go on?
Nope, I'm ready to close.
Yeah, that was really
Jai.
beautiful. It's a wonderful. Sorry.
Kripa Sindhu Devacha, Patitanam Pavanebhyo Vaishnavebhyo Namah.
I think
Thank you all
reading,
the devotees so patient.
reading Damodarastakam under your guidance, Maharaj, with your insights, and then with the input of others like Achyutananda Prabhu and Mahabodhi is very, very, and Jiva Pavana is very delicious, really wonderful. I'd like to
as a one thing, let me, as a backdrop to our Vraja-mandala Parikrama, it's an integral backdrop. It's the music of our Parikrama. You know, it's balancing with our visiting all these places. That it's like it's a part of the whole Kartik Brat.
Exactly. So just to remind everybody tonight, I do urge you to consider coming if you can at 6 p.m. UK time Maharaj has done a wonderful recording on the summary of the whole Ashtakam, the whole Damodarastakam, tonight at 6 o'clock. It's a 45-minute rendition. So that's really exciting. And just to presents tonight, in case you want to know who's speaking, tonight the speakers are Ashram Maharaj and Rasik Mohan tonight. Sorry, I got that wrong. It's Thursday today, isn't it? Sorry, it's Radhika Manchanda. No, it's not. It's Avadut Maharaj and Shamrani tonight. Oh, actually, no, it's not. Shamrani has a festival to go to. That's why Maharaj is speaking. So Tridandi Maharaj will be on first, and then Avadut Maharaj will be speaking on verse 5. So that would be really nice, having the whole Damodarastakam and then going into verse 5. And then tomorrow, just to whet your appetite a little bit more, we've got Te Kadamba, Ashisha Shva, Mahadev, Choti Charan Padi, Pavna Sarov, Nanda Bhavna, Lalit Kund, Prashadamat, or virtual Prashadamat, Uddhava Kyari, Nanda Kirak, which is Nanda Gababa's Goshal, Sanket, and Prem Sarovara. So it's another, yesterday was a super busy day. Today was kind of like going deeper with Damodarastakam, and tomorrow's another very busy day. So I'm going to hand over to Tarunji. I'm going to ask Ramananda to do Kirtan out. Thank you so much, Prabhu, for doing both Kirtans today. And I'll hand over to Tarun to finish off. Thank you so much. Vanchakalpa Tubhascha, Kripasindu Vacha, Patitanam Pavanabhyo, Vaishnavabhyo, Namanamaha. Hello to Nihari in Hawaii. I love it that you tune in from Hawaii. Dandavats. It's kind of late there. I'll ask you to unmute.
All right, Bo. I will share the image now, Ramananda. Ramananda, we can't hear you. Hey, Bo. I can't hear you, Ramananda.
What about now?
Now it's better.
Yeah? Does that mean I start all over again?
We haven't heard anything so far.
Oh, okay. Hari Haraya Nama Krishna Yadavaya Nama Hari Haraya Nama Krishna Yadavaya Nama Yadavaya Madhavaya Keshavaya Namaha Gopala Govinda Ram Shri Madhusudan Giridhari Gopinath Madana Mohan Shri Chaitanya Nityananda Shri Advaita Gopta Hari Guru Vaishnava Bhagavata Gita Shri Rup Shri Sanatan Bhatta Raghunath Shri Jiva Gopala Bhatta Das Raghunath Ei Chaya Gosai Kori Charana Bandhan Jahan Hoite Bighna Nash Abhishta Puran Ei Chaya Gosai Jar Mui Tar Das Tasabar Padarinu Mora Panchagras Tandera Charana Se Vibhakta Sanevas Janame Janame More Abhilash Ei Chaya Gosai Jave Braje Koilovas Radha Krishna Nitya Leela Korila Prakash आनंदे बोलो हरि भज वृंदावन मनेर आनंदे बोलो हरि भज वृंदावन श्री गोविंद गोपीनाथ मदन मोहन आनंदे बोलो हरि भज वृंदावन राधा कुंड श्याम कुंद गिरी गोवर्धन आनंदे बोलो हरि भज वृंदावन जहाँ मधुर मधुर वंशी बाजे यही तो वृंदावन आनंदे बोलो हरि भज वृंदावन रे भाई भज वृंदावन श्री गुरु वैष्णव पदे मजाई अमर श्री गुरु वैष्णव पाद पद्म कोरियास श्री गुरु वैष्णव पाद पद्म कोरियास नाम संकीर्तन कहे नरोत्तम दास नाम संकीर्तन कहे नरोत्तम दास हरे कृष्णा कृष्ण कृष्ण हरे 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 राम 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 हरे हरे निताई गौर हरि बोल हरि बोल हरि बोल हरि बोल निताई गौर हरि बोल हरि बोल हरि बोल हरि बोल निताई गौर प्रेमानंदे हरि हरि
Haribo. Jai. Ramananda Prabhu ki jai.
No, Sripad Siddhanta Maharaj ki jai. All Vaishnavas ki jai.
Srila Gurudev ki jai. Srila Prabhupada ki jai. Vaishnavas ki jai. So, has the recording stopped, Tarun?
No.
No, I'm just finishing now.
Okay.
It's finished. Vancha kalpatarubhyas cha kripa sindhu eva cha patitanam pavanebhyo vaishnavebhyo namo namaha.
We want to see your face.
It's not looking very good right now.
Can't be worse than this.
Very self-deprecating as usual. And